Good evening, everyone. My name is Adam, and I want to welcome you to my YouTube channel, Icons of Faith. It's a thing that I've developed over many years of working with the church and working in parts of the world that are stricken with poverty. And also here in the United States, a lot of the work that I've done and spending many years on YouTube, enjoying a lot of the works of so many people. They're just countless. Doing apologetics, doing faith based work, I realized that there isn't a whole lot of content built around the poor. And many years ago, I was very influenced by a Catholic priest when I asked him a question about where is, how do I choose the right church, Father? What stands out? What's the best way? Is it just, the Holy Spirit? Is it the building? Is it something that I'm drawn to? And he didn't even think to answer me. He just came right out and said, if the poor are on the steps, then you're at the right church. And this is something since then that I've always looked for, and I've pointed out to my kids, and it's been something that once you hear that, it's something that you can't unhear. It's really quite fascinating. And this is something that I carried into my YouTube experience. Now, I work for a foreign mission society for the church. I have for 10 years. I have run the digital media department for them. Was part of the large digital transformation back over 10 years ago. Uh, and so I've really been involved in this space for a long time. I've spent time in East Africa, South America, the Amazon, different parts throughout the United States, spent a lot of time in Europe and Asia, Japan. So I've been around a little bit. And that one thing is always true is that when I go to a church, I go to mass or I go to liturgy, there's this sense, there's something that happens when the poor are present. And I haven't seen that so much here in the YouTube space. We see some incredible apologetics, some people doing some amazing work uh, in the Catholic space. I mean, it's wonderful. But where are the poor? Is the question that I always ask. And while there are some people doing some great work there, I hope to really zoom in and bring voice, bring beauty, bring transformation to that through the work that I do. And I'm just one person, right? So on these live streams, what I want to do is as I work throughout the week, I take notes of a lot of things going on in different parts of the world, and I thought it might be a good idea to bring them to a live stream here on my little YouTube page and just kind of share what I see and some of the things that stand out to me that aren't quite talked about too often. And while there's so many people out there trying to debunk Pope Leo or put down the church here, and there's all these arguments and everybody's having arguments, there's more people by multiples of probably hundreds or thousands that are actually doing work in parts of the world that nobody even knows about. So I hope to shine a little bit of light on that for them, for our church, and to also maybe inspire some of you. So bear with me as we do this. This is my first go at it, but I really want to start off first of all, letting you know that we need to remember that our church is certainly present in places of war, places of persecution, places of poverty, displacement, places of corruption, certainly places of abuse. And this is something that is very important to me. And I hope to spotlight the situation of abuse on every episode that I do. It's incredibly important. It is the major infiltration of our church. So that's something that I will always talk about. But also not just the accountability within all that, but also the healing. What does that look like? This is most important. And a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about here is going to be painful. Some of these stories are going to be painful to hear. But with that pain comes hope. So you're going to, hopefully we're going to talk about both. So tonight we're going to I'm going to introduce to you a number of stories that are happening around the world today, that have happened, that have been going on this week. And we're going to be talking about incidents in Jerusalem on the West Bank. You've probably heard about of course, the story about the crucifix in Lebanon. I want to talk a little bit about what happened there, as well as an incident with some of our brothers and sisters at a Baptist church in Ukraine. Some things happening in South Sudan, China, Poland, Scotland, England, and of course the United States. So just another note before we get started here. These stories do involve sensitive topics, and these stories are going to probably, the things that I talk about here are probably going to trigger some people. And I am, you know, it's okay if I get bad response from it. I'm only trying to report what's going on, but it's going to trigger some people. And I want to be just kind of put that up front. We're going to be talking about violence. We're going to be talking about religious persecution. We're going to be talking uh, about abuse in the church. But I'm going to do my best to really speak with dignity and charity first. I want to make sure I do a double layer of checking my sources. And in the description, I'll be citing everything the best I can. I'm only one person. I don't have a team of producers or anything like that. Okay, so I'm going to be hoping for accuracy, doing my due diligence in this work. But as a as a survivor myself, please know that I will have absolute respect for the victims that we discuss, the survivors, even the clergy, the religious, and the local communities that are impacted by some of the things that we talk about. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that I want to talk about, and of course, the chat is open. I check it about every 3 or 4 minutes or so. So if anybody wants to say anything or chime in, please go ahead and do that. I hope that these just become open discussions. But the first one is really about this French Catholic nun that was attacked in Jerusalem this week. It's really one of the most disturbing stories to come out of Jerusalem, even though the war is happening. This is something that is so, yeah, it just really speaks to so much here. There's reports of that say that a French Catholic nun, and I saw photos of her today, and it's quite sad. She's a researcher connected with a French school of biblical and archaeological research in Jerusalem. And she was assaulted near King David's tomb, and the Israeli police arrested a 36-year-old suspect. Of course, the incident is still being investigated. It's being investigated as a possible religious attack or racially motivated. Her name hasn't been publicly released. I have seen some leaks of it, but I don't think it's appropriate to release her name. Um, so, really the key point here that I want to spotlight is that not only is it this individual attack, and as serious as that is, I think that there's a larger issue that needs to be discussed, and that's this growing concern of Christian communities in Jerusalem and in the Holy Land, uh, not and not just the people who are being abused in these Christian communities that go back to the first century that just are not getting enough media, aren't getting any media really, and what's happening to them. It's absolute terrorism. It is absolutely wrong, regardless of what side of the religious fence you're on. What is happening is um, is wrong, and the fact that we have clergy and religious and also our Christian symbols that are becoming more and more vulnerable to this violence, to continuous harassment. It's unacceptable. And for Catholics, from the Catholic perspective, this really matters deeply. Jerusalem isn't it's not just a political place. It's a holy city. It's, as we know, this is where our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ suffered, where he died, where he rose. Um, and Christians who live, pray, study, and serve there, the people who go there on mission, even people who are just visiting, Um, the they're continually facing this pressure, and I think that this is our responsibility to continue the conversation, to continue the discussion, to continue to ask for accountability, to put pressure on our representatives because of the war effort that's happening. Whether you agree with it or not, that's not what this is about right now. I'm talking specifically about the attack on this nun and the attack that are going on to these ancient Christian communities that have been part of the landscape, part of the fabric of this country. So please uh, do what you can to support our fellow Christians in this part of the world. That starts with prayer. Um, but also pressuring, as I just shared, pressuring your local representatives and speaking up about it, continuing the conversation. And this is going to bring us to uh, the broader pressures that are happening in the West Bank. And this is about the Christian communities that I was just talking about. And these are going to be the Christian communities in the village of Taba. Uh, and this area has really become an important symbol. Taba is often described as that last entirely Christian village in the West Bank. And reports in recent weeks and months have described a lot of settler intimidation. There's been destruction of property, burning of cars. There's been attacks on agricultural land, uh, and, and a lot of arson near, specifically a fire that was set near a fifth century church, the Church of Saint George. And I'm gonna put a link to an article that will, if you want to go deeper on this, but again, this isn't just this isn't a political story. This isn't a political story. It's a story about the possible disappearance of an ancient Christian community from the land where Christianity was born. And when we say that these communities are ancient, we we have to understand that's literally they are ancient. Christian presence in this region, it goes back to the earliest centuries of the church, to the beginning. And these aren't recent communities. These aren't even communities that were formed 1,000 years ago. They're not, they're not immigrant communities. These are people whose families, whose villages, whose who they are. I mean, the dirt is in their blood. Their churches, the liturgical memories that are rooted here in this holy land. This is all part of who they are. Now, for for a Catholic audience, I think that there's a question we have to ask ourselves, um, and that is, do we even know who they are? I have this conversation with people in my circle, in my community, and I often ask, "Do you know about this?" And if you do, are you including these communities, in your own prayers? I would ask that you consider this. Um, yeah, do we consider what's at stake here? Do we consider what's at stake when Christian communities in the Holy Land uh, leave, when they are reduced to just rubble, or they're forced out because of terror and intimidation? Well, I think this is something that needs to be talked about more. Once again, we need to put pressure on our representatives. If you're here in the United States, if you're a podcaster, if you're a blogger, if you're a writer, if you're just someone who talks to people, have the conversation. If Christian presence disappears from the Holy Land, then something irreplaceable is lost, not only for Palestinians or Israelis or the community in the Middle East, but for the entire church. This brings us to our next story, and this is going to be, I'm sure everybody, I'm sure you've seen, this is going to be the crucifix that was both destroyed and restored in Lebanon. Now, I did a quick YouTube video on my position on this this crucifix being destroyed, and the photo that was distributed throughout the internet about with this Israeli soldier smashing the head of Christ with a hammer. So I have my own feelings about that, and they're probably quite different than what you would expect. I actually thought that it was something that was, while it was vulgar, while it was horrible, while it was disgusting to see, it was also beautiful, because it was a reminder that Christ continues to suffer for us. It was a reminder of what he endured, and it was really interesting. Before I get into the news piece here, it was really interesting because what I felt when I saw this image was this urge, was this pull to pick him up. And I'm sure that this was shared by Christians throughout the entire world, regardless of where you're from. It was this desire to run to Christ, to lift him up, rather than to run to this young soldier and encounter him and to stop him from doing it, or to hit him or to beat him or whatever. It was rather to respond to our Lord. And when I was able to acknowledge that in my own response, my own feeling, I said, "Wow, was this meant to be?" It's really interesting. So in southern Lebanon, um, we see that this this correction that happened. It did draw a lot of public condemnation, but there were a group of Italian troops that were serving in the United Nations interim force in Lebanon, and these Italian soldiers were the ones who helped to replace the statue. Now, Reuters reported, and I'm going to kind of read about this here. Reuters reported that the Italian UN peacekeepers replaced the vandalized statue, and the AP reported that the family accepted a replacement brought from Italy during a ceremony attended by local clergy, residents, and U.S. peacekeepers. That's pretty cool. And I know that it was also mentioned by um, some of the Israeli politicians and some higher ups. But there needs to be more. This is unacceptable. If this happened in the United States to our Jewish community and our brothers and sisters, I hope that we would respond with a degree of ferocity. We just doesn't get overlooked like this, because this is serious. It's an important story. It really shows both. It shows what's this lack of care or regard, but more importantly, as I was saying, from a Christian perspective, it looks not only at the desecration but also at the restoration. It really kind of shares the story of the risen Christ, doesn't it? So, really, on one hand, it is symbolic of Christianity. Um, it's a symbol that was destroyed in a region that's already marked by fear, a region that's filled with displacement and suffering. And on the other hand, the replacement of the crucifix became an act of hope, an act of solidarity, an act of the people coming together. So for Catholics, the crucifix is never, as we know, it's not a decoration. It's not an ornament to put up in someone's yard. Although some people, I guess, do that. But it is the image of suffering transformed by love. So when a crucifix like this is destroyed, it does wound our community. It is something that we see as important. And when it's restored, it can become a public sign that the community has not been forgotten. And I would say that I would also include that that goes on for all of humanity, doesn't it? Not just the Christian community. So, uh, in it's a sign. It could be a sign of insult, but I think that we need to shift gears here and see this as a sign of hope, as a sign of solidarity, as a sign of uh, you're you're y- y- you're not going to bring us down, no matter how heavy your hammer, no matter how intense your anger. We will rise again, and that will be through love and compassion. I'd like to move on to Ukraine and talk about a church that was hit during a prayer ceremony. A Russian strike hit the house of the Gospel Church in Zaporizhia during an evening prayer meeting on April 16th, back about 2 weeks ago. The reports say that at least one person was killed. God bless this person. And 8 others were injured, and we pray for their recovery. The church was reportedly had been serving this community for years, uh, and it did a lot of humanitarian work. And this church was a Baptist church. It wasn't a Catholic parish. It wasn't a Greek Catholic church, but it belongs to and within this conversation, because this theme is quite broad, and as someone who spent time in Ukraine, in this area around Zaporizhia, um, the Christian communities are really do come together in an effort to take care and serve the people, not just to spread the gospel and to evangelize, but to do the work of helping the suffering, helping the children, helping the displaced. It is an all hands on deck situation there. So this is really why I wanted to tip my hat to our Baptist brothers and sisters over there in Zaporizhia and ask that you keep them in your prayers. And yeah, like I said, for those of us who have seen what's happening in Ukraine or followed the war closely, this is the kind of story. This kind of story really isn't abstract. Churches are um, churches aren't really just buildings over there. In war, they become shelters, they become kitchens, they become um, they become places of prayer, obviously. But when I mean places of prayer, they become so. I was at one church and they had 9 masses a day, 7 days a week. One of the chaplains that I became close with, he explained to me that almost every Catholic church there has funerals daily. Um, so these become places where people find meaning. And I do a lot of work here, and I'm going to continue to be doing a lot of work on Ukraine and the Greek Catholic Church, as well as the Roman Catholic Church, and as well as you can see here, our Protestant brothers and sisters, all Christians across Ukraine who are part of the war effort. And when I mean the war effort, I mean in the healing of grief, in the formation of courage, uh, in the development of hope, in the hope of the people. This is really what the churches are doing for the Ukrainians. So it's extremely important in a world seems to be collapsing around them, especially out in that region of Zaporizhia. The level of fear that people live in. I can tell you that going to liturgy, you could go to liturgy early in the morning. You could go to Vespers in the evening. It was packed. Everywhere I went, it was packed. When I was at the Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv, Vespers, it was all college kids. I mean, think about that for a minute. Like, I had a priest tell me that war cures imposters. Yeah, it does. So I want to ask you to keep the people at the Baptist Church in Zaporizhia in your prayers as well, for their healing, for their recovery, and for their strength. I'd like to bring your attention now to South Sudan and a missing priest and a church that has been calling for truth. In South Sudan, church leaders have renewed this week their call for answers in the case of Father Luke Ugwe Mabokusa, and his driver, Michael Beko. Hope I pronounced that right. Anyway, they disappeared while they were traveling to Nagero County in Yambio County. This is back in 2024, about a year ago, actually. Almost a year ago to date. It was April 27th that they disappeared, according to the news. And there's a renewed attention that the church is trying to bring forward about this. And this is right on the anniversary of their disappearance and the wider crisis of disappearances and the insecurity that's happening in South Sudan. And we have Bishop Eduardo Hiboro Kusala of Tambura Yambio. He's the one who's called for truth and accountability here, and while also urging people to stay away from revenge. And this is something really interesting when you get into this part of the world and the amount of conflict and uh, tribal conflict that's happening. It's really hard for us to understand in American paradigm, but it's very, very devastating when you encounter it, when you see it, and to hear a Catholic bishop calling on the people to stay away from revenge, and to just seek the truth. It really calls on us. Like, what does that mean for us? Well, I mean, yeah, it does say that the church isn't just demanding punishment; that it's actually looking for truth. It's asking for justice. It's not looking for vengeance. Um, but it calls on us as Americans, I think, as I personally reflect on this. South Sudan is one of the world's most fragile countries, and it's just there's so much violence, there's so much displacement, um, ethnic cleansing, political instability. It's life there is extremely difficult, and in that environment, priests, religious sisters, people who are doing catechetical work, catechists, and lay leaders, church administrators. They become some of the they become the rock, like the only stable presence that so many people have. So it's really important for us here in America, once again, to include them in our prayers, to include this bishop in your prayers in the seeking for truth, to be able to find this missing priest, to find his driver, to keep them in our prayers. But I would also ask you, if you feel called, to reach out to your local representative and write a letter asking for our government to put more pressure here, to ask for accountability as well, to show that this matters to you. So this is important because the church in South Sudan is doing what the church often does in states like right at the edge of chaos, and that's it's taking care of the dead, it's feeding the displaced, it's calling for peace, and refusing to let those that have disappeared be forgotten, which is why I'm bringing this story to you here tonight. So this brings us to the next story, and this is um, the pressure that's going on in China for the underground Catholics. Now, if you don't know about this story, if you're not familiar with the situation of our Catholic brothers and sisters in China, it's something that you should really spend some time learning about, because we go back to the history of the Christians in the catacombs. This hasn't changed. You can go to Rome and you can go to the Priscilla catacombs, or like you can go to these places and see and hear these stories. But I'm here to tell you that this is still happening in so many parts of the world. Human Rights Watch released a report this month saying that Chinese authorities are increasing pressure on underground Catholic communities to join the state-controlled official church. And this report describes a very tightened ideological control, surveillance, travel restrictions, and pressure on Catholics who resist registration with the Chinese Catholic Patriotic Association. And the Human Rights Watch estimates that China has about 12 million Catholics, and I've heard this word, 11 million Catholics. Um, and about one half of those are underground. And this story really does get complicated because there's a Vatican China agreement, and it, the appointment of bishops, and there's this painful divide between the registered and the underground Catholic communities that exists, and the Vatican has to really walk a fine line here. And this specific report calls for Pope Leo to review this specific agreement and be able to answer to it. So we're going to see some news coming down the pipeline here quite soon, I would imagine, from the Holy See in regards to the underground Catholics in China. And this is a very sensitive topic. It reflects the transition in the papacy, in the papacy, um, as we go through 2026 into 2027. And I'm sure that this is going to be one of the topics that we see in 2027. Now, let's just for a moment here tip our hats to the Catholics in China, and just to kind of talk about their situation here, so those who aren't familiar with it get a little better understanding. Um, Catholics, some Catholics in China, they worship openly within what I just shared with you about these open state structures that are very regulated, while others remain quite literally in house churches, in underground churches, because they're the ones who believe in a loyalty to the Pope and to Rome, and this requires resisting government control over the church. This is a dangerous thing too. This is taking a huge risk, um, and we do have to be careful here because we don't quite know the exact numbers, but it is, as I already said, it's estimated that it is a significant portion of China's Catholics who belong to these underground communities. Again, probably somewhere around 5 million. We don't quite know. So there is a central question that we have to ask ourselves. For China's underground Catholics, the question is really kind of terrifying. It's simple, but how do you remain faithful when fidelity itself can make you such a target? And isn't this so much of our story? And it's as we pray for our brothers and sisters in China who keep the faith strong and alive in the darkness of their basements, under the threat of being arrested and disappearing, that the faith for them uh, is is more strong than the threat. I think this is something inspiring, and it demands that um, we show solidarity with them in our prayer. We show solidarity with them in our churches, in our mission work, however we can. Continue this conversation, please. The next story brings us here in the United States, and this is about the Native American communities and the Catholic Church, and the stories about the boarding school situation that's happened here in the United States. Um, the U.S. bishops have supported efforts connected to the quote Truth and Healing Commission on Indian Boarding School Policies Act. Now, this proposed commission would investigate the history and impact of Native American boarding schools, including institutions connected to Catholic organizations. Now, the USCCB officially supported H.R. 7325 in a letter dated March 16th, 2026. The signatories were Archbishop Shelton Febre, Bishop John Folda, Bishop Robert Brennan, and Bishop Barry Nestow. Now, Bishop McClory has been involved in Native American affairs, but he was not a primary signatory on the most recent House letter. So, for those of you guys who follow the work of the USCCB and who are following this, what's going on here, it's very important. I really hope that this is a thorough investigation because this is such a dark part of history here in North America, and I think like so much of the history, it has been hijacked. The whole truth hasn't been told, and this doesn't just mean the whole truth, meaning I'm giving anybody a pass here because I'm certainly not. But sometimes in the early 1900s, there's a whole period in late 1800s, a whole period where history becomes completely manipulated, uh, um, and I hope that there is a strong independent investigation that goes on so that justice can be brought to those who suffered through this, those who were persecuted by the church, and we can finally, for dignity's sake, have the correct history come forward, and so that our children can learn the correct history, that our church can learn truly what happened here, because it is such a dark shadow on the American Christian landscape. So, this is really about whether the church can tell the truth about the past in a way that does open doors to healing. Um, yeah. So, this thing about truth, it keeps coming up, doesn't it? As Catholics, we need to embrace the truth. We need to protect the truth. I did a whole, I wrote a long paper, a long Substack about the Sean Ryan podcast and a guest that he had on. He was just using little slivers of distruth that completely change the whole story. And if we allow that, if we give that a pass, it's kind of like, the first few shingles on a roof, they can be a little bit off. But what ends up happening is the entire roof is destroyed. It becomes something completely different. And when it comes to topics like this, we need to be protective of the truth, no matter how much it hurts us, because it matters. And if Catholic institutions harmed Native children, Indigenous families, if they harmed, destroyed their languages, they impacted their cultures, they separated their communities, then our church has a responsibility to participate in the truth telling, in the repentance, and in the repair at whatever level that looks like. But hopefully, we'll be able to have the conversations, we'll be able to do the proper research, and we'll be able to get to a point where that healing and that coming together can happen as it should have. So I want to get to the next part of my live stream here, and I know I've been going for a while here, and I appreciate anybody who's sticking with me. But this is the part that I'm always going to continue to defend, to fight for, and it's something that's so close to my heart, and that's accountability of abuse of children, of minors. I have so much to say here, and I hope that every time if God wills me to and gives me the strength and the courage and the endurance to continue with these weekly, then I hope to bring a spotlight to every single instance that comes across my eyes throughout the week about this, and I hope that we can stand shoulder to shoulder in protecting these children, sticking up for anybody who was abused. And also, this is very important to me to not forget about those that media and history and records just don't speak about. I believe that for every one victim, there are 100 unnamed victims. Now, that's not scientific. I'm just, I don't know what those numbers are, but I like to think that for every one person who receives justice, there are 100 more that didn't. And I really want to make sure that we keep in our prayers the survivors who are unnamed, the bones of the children that were found in the wells that are unnamed, the victims in the 1800s, in the 1700s that will never be known, that they're not forgotten, that they're kept in our prayers. So I'm not trying to be too sensational here, but it matters. It matters when we as the Catholic Church need to move forward through this darkness. So the next story is about uh, uh, this priest in Scotland, Father Stephen Bailey. He's a Catholic priest who was sentenced on April 29th. And while he did not victimize a child, he was sentenced to prison and placed on a sex offenders register for 10 years after being convicted of assaulting a 35-year-old intoxicated man. Now, to some, that may seem like, oh, like, what's going on here? It's quite a bit different than the situation that's been happening with children, and maybe it is. However, not too far different. And I'm not going to go into the details of why I'm saying this right now. But if you want to go ahead and check just any of the AG reports that have dropped since, um, I don't know, since Boston, the Boston Globe, since, I don't know, like Baltimore, go to Pennsylvania. I'll tell you what, go to Rhode Island. That dropped 2 months ago. And just go ahead and run a chat GPT on the statistics of the predators and the victims and who the victims were, and look for some patterns there. And you will very quickly find why, oh, okay, I understand why this is a pattern. So this priest was convicted for sexually assaulting a 35-year-old intoxicated man in the Diocese of Paisley. And he hasn't served in public ministry since the arrest, and the canonical process is currently underway. And like I just said, this case involves an adult victim, but it does raise major safeguarding concerns about the abuse of trust, about the intoxication of priests, about consent, about priestly authority and access to private access to spaces that this type of thing just shouldn't even be considered in. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens here. This is a a bit of a unicorn case in the conversation of abuse, but it feeds to a pattern that really needs to be thought through and considered here. And I would ask you for right now to do your own research, but I'm going to do an episode on the Rhode Island statistics. We're just going to talk numbers here. We're just going to talk math and ask what that math means. We're going to see if we can get to a data relevancy point to be able to find, like, hey, what are the patterns that we should be looking at when these other AG reports drop, and what actually here is going on? Because I've only heard one priest, one person on YouTube talk about this. And hopefully I'm going to get to that and have that conversation later. Let's go to England. The Ealing Abbey is putting up a plaque. Yeah, this is in London. They're preparing to dedicate a plaque for survivors of abuse this week as part of a mass of hope and healing. And this is going to happen on May 2nd. The parish notice describes the event as a mass for survivors and all those that have been impacted by abuse, with the dedication of the plaque at Ealing Abbey. So there's going to be an event there on May 2nd. And while this is a different kind of story, it's not a trial. It's not, anybody being found out. It's not a financial settlement or anything like that. It is a public act of memorial, of keeping top of mind what has happened, and giving some type of honor to the survivors, present and past, like I already said. So the next thing that I want to talk about is what's happening in Poland, in the diocese of Sosnowiec. I hope I pronounced that right. So in Poland right now is undergoing a really serious reckoning over the clergy and the sexual abuse and the failures of the church with accountability with all this. So this week, a partial report from the Diocese of Sosnowiec identified at least 50 minor victims, and the reports say that 66% of these victims were actually girls. 96% of them were under the age of 15. This matters. Now, this is based on my research, and I've been researching this now very, very as thoroughly as I can, but quite a bit for 7 years now, and I can say that these numbers are pretty interesting. But the final report hasn't been released yet. So once again, I just want to say that this is a partial report. But separately, the bishop, Bishop Andrzej Yesh, he went on trial in February, and he's accused of failing to promptly report allegations of child sexual abuse by priests in his diocese. Now, Reuters reported that he pleaded not guilty, but he could still face up to 3 years in prison, incarcerated, if convicted. Good. This is what needs to happen, is that these men need to be acknowledged by the law of the land and not moved around. So this is good news. This is a good thing to hear. But again, it's a partial report, and I'm sure that more is going to be uncovered. This is described as the first criminal trial of a Polish bishop, also over the alleged failure to report abuse. And I'm curious to know if this is the first layer of an onion in Poland, of the very Catholic Poland, of the bastion of Catholicity in Europe. And look, I believe that what we're talking about right now, is we're building a moat of protection around our faith here, not one to safeguard criminals, not one to safeguard the to hide the history of this. Quite the opposite, but to protect the dignity of the victims and to protect our church, because these. I don't want to get too far on a soapbox here. I just want to I want to report what's going on. However, it is it is reassuring to see that they are being tried and convicted thoroughly with thorough investigations. Um, there's also support and accountability structures in Poland. I want to point out that the Catholic Church is offering, and those include the St. Joseph Foundation that was established by the Polish Bishops' Conference. And then there's independent child protection organizations that provides support for minors and families. Some of these are also Catholic. So there is infrastructure in Poland right now that are doing the work that we should have seen the American Catholic Church doing instead of cowering and hiding behind the legal system. So this is while it hurts to hear, and it's very sad to see, it's also assuring to see that we have good bishops and the church standing up for what is right. And I also want to say that I want to throw a shout out to the Rhode Island bishop who responded when this report dropped. I watched an entire interview with him. Now, I'm not going to go too deep. As a native Rhode Islander as well, by the way, I'm not going to go too deep on my sentiments here. But I just want to say that while I did mention Rhode Island, I do want to say that the report stated that the bishops in Rhode Island were very supportive of the investigation, that they participated in the investigation, and that there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of recent moving priests around or any of the stuff that we've seen so much like in Pennsylvania and in other cities, in other dioceses. Finally, I want to bring it to the United States now. Going from Rhode Island, we are going to go to New York. We're going to go to California. We're going to go to Maryland. Uh, there are a few stories this week that show that the abuse crisis really continues to affect the different dioceses here in the States, legally, financially, morally, of course. In New York, the Archdiocese has, while they have not filed bankruptcy, it is facing major financial pressure connected to 1,700 abuse claims. Yeah. However, I would ask you to go and look at the New York State Attorney General's, the New York State investigation and how that was stopped. And there's a lot of this gets complex, and I'm not going to get into it right now, but there's a lot more than 1,700. Um, and reports say that church leaders warned pastors that hundreds of millions may need to be raised to avoid bankruptcy. So there's this push in the church to raise money, to raise money, to raise money, and to do what? To pay the bills for this abuse. This gets a little murky. New York's in a bad state right now. I live in New York. This is where I'm talking from, and I love my diocese. I love my church. I love my parish priest. I love so many of the people here. However, they created a huge problem, and they need to figure their way out. Oakland, California, the diocese announced the closure of 13 parishes this week amid severe financial strain. 300 sexual abuse lawsuits, bankruptcy proceedings, declining attendance, school enrollment has completely dropped. And of course, there's shrinking vocations ministry. There's shrinking priesthood. Maryland, I mean, the state's highest court ruled that the attorney general cannot publicly disclose names of uncharged clergy and staff connected to the Archdiocese of Baltimore abuse inquiry. And this, of course, raises a very, very difficult tension between transparency, due process, and so many of the survivors that are frustrated. And that's got to be infuriating. Why? Why? Uh, why can the truth not come? And I know it does get complex. It's a web, but none of that should matter. What should matter is the truth and the salvation of souls, in the healing of those that were hurt. Shame on you, Maryland. Again, for those of you guys who are listening from Maryland, I would ask you to push on your representatives, push on your priests, speak to your bishops. Please be active and pray for the people and the survivors in Maryland. Uh, this is in Congress. Lawmakers have reintroduced bankruptcy reform legislation intended to help survivors of child sexual abuse continue seeking evidence, even when institutions file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. This is huge news, especially after here we had the 2019 statute of limitations lifted, and then all of a sudden, boom, there was this huge deluge of lawsuits that were filed. This isn't going away. This is not going away, and good. It shouldn't go away. We need to clean everything out of our church. It was infiltrated. I could go on and on, going back to Second Vatican Council. I'm not trying to go to the trad conversation here in any way, but there are some objective truths that happened that cannot be denied, and we are now in the battle for the salvation of not just the souls of people, but also the salvation of our church and the salvation of faith that people have, the people who are on the fence about their faith that they so truly want to believe, but they don't want to go to a church that's infested with predatory priests. They don't want to go to a church that has been so scarred by such horrors. We have a responsibility as the faithful to do this work, to defend the church in any way that we have possible, to have these conversations, to support financially the survivors, to push and lean into our bishops to not accept any of this, and to demand accountability. I also do want to say, though, that some of these reports I have found to the media has kind of run amok with them. I know that the Pennsylvania report, there was a lot of liberties taken in the reporting of the report. So we do need to be careful. We can't take them as meme value. We can't take them as face value. We can't just, you know, read the first line in CNN or Drudge Report on when these things happen. We actually have to go in and do the research ourselves to understand the truth. And then with that, we're armed with this information, with this data, with the truth. And with that, we can go to our local representatives. We can go to our bishops. We can go to our parishes. We can speak. We can have this conversations in our communities of faith. It's very important. Don't take this stuff at face value, because it it gets diluted over here, and then it gets spun over here, and then the truth runs in a completely different story to get more clicks, to sell more ads. So we have to be careful with all of this. Okay. So I want to close it here. I want to thank you for taking this time with me over the last hour to talk about what's been happening in our church, where the news isn't really reporting so much. I hope that you have found some inspiration. I hope that if you're still watching this stream, if you're still watching this video when I republish it, that you're inspired to, at least in one of these topics that I've spoke about, include them in your prayers. I think this is most important. And to get active in your church, in your own personal missionary discipleship, to be able to find something to cling to help, to serve, to be present, and to pray together in community, and to be able to support not just our fellow Christians, not just our fellow Catholics, but all people who need us. So with that, I thank you, and glory to Jesus Christ. And I look forward to seeing you on the next live stream. And I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this. How did I do? Was this interesting? Was it inspiring? Yeah, thank you so much.